Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Thursday, May 5th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 122 days, the game against Michigan in 206 days. As you were probably expecting after listening to yesterday's show with Bill Green, offensive lineman Austin Siereveld did in fact commit to Ohio State on Wednesday afternoon. That brings the Buckeyes 2023 class to 10 commits at the moment. Today we're going to be talking about some of the guys who could fill out the rest of that class, as well as maybe 2024 and beyond. My guest today is Kevin Noon. He is the host of the Big Me Kickoff podcast. He's also in the middle of the Southern Swing along with Marc Givler. Kevin, thanks for being here. And where are you exactly? Where is here for you right now?
At the moment that we're doing this show, I believe I am in Lake City, Florida. You kind of have to look at the phone in the hotel room to see where you are because it's been a lot of miles logged already. But we made it to Lake City, Florida, and that's just real. I'm not a kid here. It was just a good staging point to start another day.
All right. So before we start talking about some of these recruits, I think you summed up the vibe very well today, where you have to kind of stop and think about where you are on this trip. This is one of these the old if this is Tuesday, this must be Denmark European tours, except you are doing a high school football tour. So, before we start talking about some of the recruits we're going to be talking about, can you sort of explain the Southern Swing, like what it is, and how long you and Mark have been doing it, and just how far are you guys traveling on this trip?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure of how many years. I think this is 8, maybe, that we've been doing it. And honestly, what it came down to is previously working in a recruiting network. They do their best to go and talk to kids, and they're having to fulfill national needs. And when they do that, you may or may not get a comment about Ohio State. And if you do, you're only getting one. You're not getting two, and that wasn't enough for our readers. So we decided that it was probably best of let's not complain about it. Let's just go do it. So it started off as a 1 week tour where we kind of did Georgia. Maybe there was some North Carolina in there, and that was kind of the case for a year or two. Then we kind of started dipping into Florida, and then we realized 1 week wasn't enough time to do it, so it became 2 weeks. And in later iterations of it, we started going to Texas. We went to Arizona one year when it was warranted. We've been through Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee. I mean, we've been through a lot of places. I mean, we certainly an average tour. If we do 2 weeks and we go beyond just Georgia and Florida, we've gone well over 5,000-6,000 miles in the car. I've done pieces in the past where I've said the amount of miles we've gone, we could have driven from Columbus to Nome, Alaska, or things like that. I mean, it's quite ridiculous. With this trip, they're so fluid. We don't know exactly everywhere we're going to go. We have ideas of what we'd like to do, but availability of players and just kind of maximizing things. They're kids that we would desperately like to see, but if you're 600 miles off the beaten path from everything else, it's just not realistic. So we got to make the most out of it. So to be determined on how many miles we're going to go at this point, but we've gone through the state of Georgia so far. We're obviously, as we're recording this, sitting in the state of Florida, so you know where we are now. But beyond that, to be determined.
All right. Well, you talked about making the most of this trip, and you guys have you're only a few days in right now, and you've definitely been making the most of this trip. You guys have been churning out a ton of content. You can find that all at the front page of BuckeyeScoop.com. You have also seen some really strong prospects. Let's start with defensive lineman AJ Hoffler. He is a 4-star defensive end for 2023. What did you guys learn talking to AJ?
First thing I learned talking to AJ is that he has a vice grip of a handshake. He nearly took my arm off. I've always prided myself on a strong handshake, and he sat there and clamped down on my hand. And I talked to Mark as we were walking to our car, and he's like, "Yeah, I noticed that too." But big, good-looking kid. Things seem to be moving really quickly with Ohio State. And then things kind of slow down as it happens. Kids get really hopped up and excited, and then they realize, oh, I need to check things out. Ohio State and Clemson are right there. I know Mark has put a lot of good content with the camp notebook that he's done there. I mean, I think Clemson has done a really solid job in closing the gap there. And we'll have to see there. But Woodward Academy, where Hoffler goes, puts out a lot of great kids, and I think that AJ is whoever gets him is going to be getting a tremendous kid. But there are a lot of kids on Ohio State's board that are very similar in terms of where does he fit in terms of on the football side of things. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see there as he starts to take his visits.
Yeah, it is still May. Just as a reminder, even the early signing period is still 7 months and a week or two away. So yeah, we're still a little ways out. There's not expecting a lot of firm and final answers and firm and final decisions on here. This is more kind of like a taking stock of where things stand right now. Someone else that we want to take stock of is Kyan Lee. He is a 4-star cornerback. That is a name that you've probably heard both Bill and Mark talk about a few times on the show before as a really impressive defensive back prospect. Where do things stand with him right now?
With Lee, I mean, obviously he was a one-time Georgia commit. It seemed like things had just disappeared at that point, and then that he backs off of that, and I was very impressed with seeing him. I mean, it was like day one of practice there at Cedar Grove High School, so we didn't, it's kind of like what we get to see at Ohio State in terms of practice. It wasn't a ton. I mean, at least we weren't ushered out into an atrium or something to not get to see anything else. Again, you're going to just get a lot of this, as you said. It's May. I mean, he's not like right on the verge of making a commitment or anything. He wasn't really showing his hand. He certainly had certain schools that he was lighting up for a little bit more as he was talking about them. I mean, I think that Ohio State has a lot to feel good about. There are some ties in terms of Cedar Grove has produced kids that have gone to Ohio State before. Antoine Jackson being one, granted via Auburn and whatever the forefather of the transfer portal was at that point. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see there. I think a lot of people, as soon as Lee backed off of his commitment, thought that Ohio State was going to be right there. I mean, I remember when he earned his offer at an Ohio State camp when Ohio State was recruiting Kristen Miller at the time. I don't. We'll know more after he takes his visits.
And one of the biggest names on the Buckeyes 2023 board is Caleb Downs. He's a 5-star safety. Another guy that you and I saw at camp last summer. He is obviously a priority target for Ohio State. They've got a couple safeties in the class already. He would be some real nice icing on that cake for the Ohio State recruiting class. What did you learn talking to Caleb?
We learned that we were the first video interview that he's done. He certainly has done a lot of interviews before. Some schools were by to kind of check him out. You can't necessarily, the rules are always constantly changing, but that he was having an early morning lift. We talked with him, kind of a laid back kid, kind of chill, but he's a tremendous football player. I certainly think Ohio State's very much in the mix there. I think maybe Ohio State is not getting as much credit with him as some other schools are. Again, that's the thing. You go into the Southeast and everybody expects that, for especially in the state of Georgia, that in-state Georgia coming off of a national championship, that they should be able to just go and pick and choose who they want. Alabama being Alabama, Clemson still is Clemson. But, the things he was saying about Ohio State certainly were very positive there. I think that the connections are very strong. And, I like Ohio State's chances there. That, I don't have some sort of, we'll use the industry term, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to pick him to anywhere at this point. But I'm cautiously optimistic that he could end up in a safety class at Ohio State that already has guys like Cedric Hawkins and Malik Hartford. I think that this safety class for Ohio State could be, just based on the numbers and just the scheme changes of maybe even needing to have 5 in this class, could be a safety class that, goes down for the ages.
And, the way things have worked out on this trip so far, all the guys you've been writing about have been on the defensive side of the ball, which is just kind of a random thing, but kind of a good, we end up with a good deep dive cross-section of what the recruiting board might look like in 2023, 2024 for Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball. The next guy to talk about on that front is 2024 linebacker Myles Graham. Now, he is the son of former Florida running back Ernest Graham, which is the second most upsetting recruiting name I've heard this week, behind Freddie Lennox Jr. on being on recruiting boards right now. Kevin, when did we get so old? How did this happen?
I'm older than you. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, this is, I mean, yeah, it was when Mark told me, he's like, oh yeah, his dad, played at Florida. I'm like, God, I think I might remember his recruitment. I mean, I didn't work in the industry at that point, at least, but I mean, yeah, time is undefeated on that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, he's a good looking kid out there. I mean, we did at Woodward, we didn't get to see practice. I mean, it was they weren't practicing that day, but he walks around and he passes the all airport team. It's one of those things. I mean, you had to kind of remind yourself that he's still kind of a youngin at this point. Great interview. I mean, anybody who hasn't had a chance to check it out, be sure to check it out at Buckeye Scoop. But I think once again you sit there and you immediately want to just dismiss it and saying he's going to follow his dad's footsteps to Florida. And that happens a decent amount. I mean, legacies happen, but just as much they don't happen. So, you're just going to have to kind of wait and see. I think we're only just scratching the surface on what his recruitment could be. I mean, we can go back to, his teammate, AJ Hoffler, who we spoke about, who the day we were there had just picked up his 50th offer. I think that if Myles Graham just extends his recruitment out to that point and doesn't make a quick decision, which I'm not under any belief that he's going to make a quick decision. I mean, he's going to be a 50 offer dude as well. I mean, he's just he just gets it. I think he's somebody that would really fit the Ohio State scheme well if Ohio State was able to get across the finish line with him. But you look at the young guys and you just have to kind of remind yourself, just with all of Ohio State's recruiting success, they're not filling in the ranks of 24 really at this point. Now, there could be a day where the dam breaks and we see several happening. There's a certain quarterback out there that could probably, be a pretty, huge piece to all of that. But as we stay on this side, a commitment anywhere is not imminent.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, these are 20. He's a 2024. The next guy we're going to be talking about is a 2024 as well. That means they still have 2 more seasons of high school football to play before they would commit or be able to sign. And so they are halfway through their high school careers. Still a long way to go. So think about how long the last couple of years of high school felt like they lasted to you. That's still quite a ways to go. The last guy I did want to talk to you about is another 2024. It is linebacker Sammy Brown. We were talking about him a little bit before the start of the show. The measurables there are just nuts, just crazy. Like, he just sounds like an incredible athlete. Let people know a little bit about Sammy Brown.
Well, I'll start by saying that if he ends up being a legacy, that would be incredibly weird because his dad played at Furman, which is Division One FCS. So I think that
Go
Sammy.
Paladins.
Exactly. I dropped a Go Paladins and he seemed impressed. I'm like, dude, I have a sickness. I watch a lot of sports. I know these things. I drink and I know things. Yeah, he is a 3 sport star. I mean, he's a tremendous football player. He is a track athlete, not field track. I mean, dude's a sprinter. At 6'2", 225. Just had like a PR on the 100 meters of 10.84, which is very impressive, especially for somebody that size. He is a phenomenal wrestler as well. So, he just checks off a lot of boxes. And, you just wonder how a kid like that's going to be able to balance all that stuff out. He just seems to have figured it out. Plus, he has a cool flow with a curly mullet. So, it's he was an impressive young man. They've all been. We haven't talked to any kid where I'm just like, I don't see it. But with Sammy, I certainly see it. There's going to be people who are going to be concerned about the proximity of Jefferson, Georgia. I mean, he goes to high school in Jefferson. I think he's from Commerce. The proximity to Athens, but he was very matter of fact of saying it took us longer to drive from home to the Atlanta airport than it took us to fly from Atlanta airport to Columbus, Ohio, to visit Ohio State, as he's visited Ohio State before. So, we see a lot of times where younger kids, younger in the recruiting process, that is, they're like, oh, I'm open to everybody. And then as the reality of having to leave home and mama's cooking and laundry and all that kind of disappears, the circle gets smaller and smaller. With Sammy, I wouldn't be surprised if, all the way to the end, he was looking at schools in Texas and in Ohio State. And he said that he wants to visit schools like, Michigan State and that other school up there in that state as well. And and wants to get back to Ohio State because obviously Ohio State has had some changes in terms of its coaching staff. I mean, he already feels that he has a good relationship kind of going with Ryan Day. I mean, a good read on him. He's going to have to kind of rebuild some things with Jim Knowles and some of those guys. But yeah, I would say that anybody that really pops in a tape of Sammy Brown is going to be excited. And I already know that over on the Ask the Insiders board, there's a bit of a cult following of him at this point.
Yes, big, fast, athletic, and a curly mullet. Like, I think that's all the boxes, right? That's all the boxes you can possibly check.
All the boxes,
so yeah, I think those are the 5 stars right there. So you mentioned being impressed with all the guys you've seen so far. Who are you maybe most interested to see in the next few days of your trip?
Well, I'm excited about, not letting out any state secrets that we're going to be heading south and we're going to go and see a lot of these talented guys in South Florida. I mean, there's been a lot of positive buzz with Brandon Ennis. I certainly want to have a chance to talk to Brandon Ennis before. I had a chance to talk to him when the South Florida Express team had made not an official visit to Ohio State, but about as official as you get with most of them in tow. I want to have a chance to talk with him. I've never had a chance to talk to somebody like Cormani McLean. If we can make that visit happen, I would be very excited about that. I really like the conversation I had with Ohio State commit Cedric Hawkins. I'm going to get a chance to talk to him for a second time within a 2-month period. In his neighborhood, so that's going to be a lot different than what it was talking to him over at the Blackwell. I just think that there's so much talent in the state of Florida, and once again, Ohio State's doing such a great job there that it'll be interesting to see what some of these kids have to say when they're in a more natural setting. But there are a lot of guys that we already have planned that we're going to talk to. There are a lot of guys that we're still working on getting around to talking to. So it's worth the price of admission. Stick with us here on Southern Swing because it's always a good time. We'll even throw in a couple scoop eats while we're at it. I got one posted finally on Tuesday night. It had been sitting in the camera for 2 days, but we make a good time of this trip because the amount of miles we log or whatever, if we don't allow ourselves to have a little bit of fun with it, it could become maddening.
Yeah, that much time in the car, that much driving, that many nights in hotels. You've really got to like the people you're traveling with. Luckily, Mark's pretty fun to travel with. You're not so bad yourself. We generally have a decent time on the road. So yes, I'm sure you guys are having a little fun as well. And you can make sure you find that Scoop Eats. You can find all those player interviews. YouTube.com/Buckeye Scoop. You can find articles about all these guys on the front page of BuckeyeScoop.com. If you want Mark's analysis on where things maybe stand more specifically with some of these guys, you can find that on the Ask the Insiders board. Tons of great content, and they are just getting started. They are literally just getting started. Got another more than a week, I think, on the road. So yeah, plenty of good stuff still to come. So you can find all that stuff, all of those places. You can also, I'm going to guess Kevin will probably do a Big Me Kickoff podcast at some point when he's down there. You can find that. You can find Gives in the Bank with Marc Givler and Bill the Bank Green. You can find Around the Oval with Alex Gleitman. You can find Buckeye Weekly with Tony Gerda and myself. You can find them all wherever you're listening to this. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find those. You can subscribe right there so you never miss an episode, and also leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.